Welcome to Jung at Harp, episode number 117 on the precipice of change. I'm Kathleen Wiley, and I am here with Deborah Henson-Conant. Deborah is a composer, a mentor, a coach, an extraordinary musician, and I'm a psychoanalyst. And we come together every week for a series of conversations. We don't have answers, but we explore questions. And we both play the harp, and that's why we call this Jung at Harp. So, how do we take a final step that we know is going to change something in our life that we've yearned for, but some part of us is collapsing, is our question today. So,
yeah, there's a reason for this question. There's two reasons for this question. I have lived this many times, and I am living this right now. And in my musical, The Golden Cage, which just got released on YouTube and as a premiere and is now on the Streaming Musicals network so that people all over the world can see it, it is a part of this story. The story is actually my autobiography, but I didn't know it was, as two different parts of me. The part that got stuck in a cage when I was 19, not literally, but in the cage in my own mind. And then the other life that has been trying to reconnect with that. And basically my life of flying through the harp. The harp has given me the chance to fly, but there was part of me that was still stuck. And in this story, there's a moment at which these two characters, who are really two parts of me, one of them is trying to free the other. And in order to do that, because the one who needs to be freed out of the cage is a complete drama queen, and so the other one who desperately wants to own this cage, has come up with this completely ridiculous set of things that Alphea in the cage has to do in order for her to get out. And very much like any incantation that we go through to free ourselves from what we're stuck in. And at the final moment, Alphea, the one in the cage, simply cannot do the final act that would allow her to be free. Now, the fact is, this may or may not be true. All of it may be imaginary, in the play even. But she thinks she is reliving the experience, and I often relive the experience, that I've gone through everything that I need to do until the final step to really change and transform my life or something that I'm doing. And that final change, I cannot do that last step. I know it's not just me, because I know that so many people talk about any project and the first 99% of it, in a sense, it's not that it's easy, but it's that last 1%, that last transformative action that needs to be taken, where we often just stop and cannot take action. And so I want to talk about it for two reasons. I mean, one, in that I'm very aware that this story, The Golden Cage, is an allegory for many of us, and particularly for me. And you are a Jungian psychoanalyst, and also because I live this often in my life. So I would love to just have you unpack that from a Jungian standpoint.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question to ask ourselves. What is the draw? What is the pull towards collapsing? And, on stage in the musical, Alphea literally falls to her knees. She falls to the floor. She collapses and says, "Oh, I can't do this. I can't do this last step of blowing the trumpet." And in the moment she does that, Boris, because he has come up with the scheme to get her free, is like, "What do you mean you can't do it?" I mean, he's angry with her. And in his anger, he just does what he's known all along is the simple solution, is he just starts pulling Boris out. And so in some ways, I think we have to remember, when we get to that point and a part of us, the ego is collapsing, our sense of self, it's, "I can't do this," that we have to look to see, where is the part of us that knows we can do it and that is angry with us for collapsing. And in this case, Boris doesn't punish her, doesn't judge her, but he says, look, Alphea, you can do it. And he just starts taking the bars out.
Well, let's be clear that he's got massive ulterior motives.
Of course he does. And the larger self we are has an ulterior motive. I mean, Jung says that the largesse of who we are wants us to embody all of our parts, that it wants us to become whole. And so there is, if we believe that, there is a Boris-like energy in us that wants us to embody and live into these other desires and the territory of who we are and kinds of relationships with ourselves and other people, that there is something organic about our psyche that wants wholeness, wants completeness, doesn't want us staying in familiar territory that really does bog us down and trap us in what feels like a prison.
As you're saying this, I'm thinking, wow, I would really love to have a 4-hour workshop taking every theme apart in this way, because I know that we are, so many of us are living, being stuck, being trapped, being isolated in either fear of just wanting to feel where we feel like where we are is at home. We know we would like to leave, but it's very scary for us to actually take that action. Right. And in this play, both characters are actually trapped, because the one who can fly, Boris, he's trapped on the outside of the cage, and he's also trapped in his absolute obsession that this is what he wants. So in fact, he has many opportunities in his life, as we all do, to do so many things. And yet he's so obsessed with this one thing that he isolates himself from everything else, going towards this one desire. But what I'm hearing you say that I think is so powerful, and I want to look at from a Jungian standpoint, and the allegory of it is that this is our desire to complete. We've talked about this before, and just for our listeners, this play happened, the instigation happened when I was 19, asking a question: is my life going to be about security or freedom? The characters, as if they just like popped out, oh, these are two sides of a question, A and B, which then became Alpha and Beta, which then became Alphea and Boris. So while it is a play, and while it's in this, as you see the movie, which is so powerful with these amazing actors, it's a woman and a man, but it's really just two sides of me, as there are two sides of every one of us. And I believe that your work is all about the connecting of those.
Absolutely. I mean, Jung says that one-sidedness is the cause of all neurosis. And he defines neurosis as the falsification of reality. But, I mean, Alphea is very neurotic. She has this false idea that her home, where she lives, what's familiar, is a prison of cement and stone that she cannot get out of.
But wait, it's not a false idea. It's actually true. She literally, seriously can't. It literally is like that from the inside.
From the inside. But this is the other thing is we get into what's truth. There's absolute truth and relative truth. There's like, what's the reality? And the only reality any of us experience is through our own psyche, through our own filters. So you're absolutely right. For Alphea, it's a very real experience, even though the objective reality is that it isn't.
But wait, but when Boris gets into the cage, even though he knows, even though we know that we are trapped in something, he still, and even though he knows it's not real, it still traps him. It still is from the inside cement and iron. And I have it that once we are locked inside ourselves, it's not just it's not, I mean, the subjective reality is the only one that actually we can work on, right? Or
No.
Okay.
No. The subjective reality is the one that most people think is the absolute truth. And so part of the work of consciousness, and I think part of the artistic expression, is actually an opening to the larger truth. Jung talked about that there is the objective psyche and the subjective psyche. And the paradox is we can only know anything through our subjective psyche. So what you are saying is absolutely true in terms of what it feels like to the human being, that our subjective psyche, the subject we are, our feeling, is all we can know, until there is an opening where something of the objective psyche, something outside of our own subjectivity, penetrates us. And again, we see that symbolized in the musical. And because once that penetration happens, it wakes up the subjective psyche to say, oh, it isn't all just me. My view isn't the only view. There's something else going on here. And initially, as Alphea was in the musical, we're scared by that. She goes into defense mode. But ultimately, it is that penetration of something from outside of our own subjectivity that opens us up to expand and change. A closed system can become very inert. And it's that infusion from the outside. So Jung talked very much about that. The work of individuation does involve realizing and the ego beginning to say, okay, yeah, all I see and all I feel is this. And the truth, the larger truth, is there's something outside of me. There's something, in AA and the 12-step programs, they talk about it as something bigger than myself. I surrender to that which power greater than myself. Mm-hmm. That's what they're talking about, is that although when caught in our addictions, whatever they may be, that are stones of cement in prison, we feel as if that's all there is. And we keep trying of our own volition to do the right incantation. We have to accept it's going to take something outside of me here, an infusion from something, a penetration from something. And that can come in the form of education, ideas, through books, through sponsors, through attending meetings, through a therapist, through seeing a musical.
It could come through a near death experience.
Yeah.
What happens here. As you were talking, I was thinking, how did I write this? I didn't know any of this. Mm-hmm. I know this is a different question, but I'm curious because I think it says something about art and the value of actually engaging in our art. This story came and I started writing it, and then I worked, and then people had questions and I tried to answer the questions. And now as people talk about the story, it's deep. Mm-hmm. and it's revealing, and it says so much about life that I didn't know. How do we write? But is this like what dream interpretation is about? Is it that we are all telling these stories all the time because we're all revealing this to ourselves, but we don't know how to interpret it?
So there are multiple questions in what you just said, but I'll answer the question in that you wrote it from your unconscious. You wrote it from this connection to the objective reality that your subjectivity at 19 did not have words or cognitive consciousness of. So it's there, and this is part of the beauty of Jung's model of the psyche, and I believe the reality of psyche is we're always connected to the larger objective reality and objective psyche, and those energies come up through us and take shape and the specific personality, ego self that we are, but the connection's always there. The ego loses sight of that. And the process of growing up and all of the developmental tasks and socialization and finding our way in the outer world, we tend to forget there's something deeper, bigger, larger, more all-knowing inside. And, from a Jungian perspective, Alphea and Boris are two parts of the same psyche. They're not separate. And there are actually multiple parts of our psyche, and again, if we look at in the musical, Boris references his father and the stories he was told as a child. And so there are multiple parts of ourselves. We're seeing the playing out of these two opposites that they represent, the desire, the safety and the security, which is only one pair of many opposites we have to dance with in our psyche.
Whoa. So wow. So if anybody took the opposite, like if anybody took two opposites in our psyche and started writing a play or a story about them, what I'm hearing is that eventually, I mean, this was a story I explored and uncovered over time, which has been an incredible luxury to have a life in which there's, a story you keep going back to and trying to understand. But I'm in what you just said, I'm thinking this could be true of if we take any of those two and create, I mean, my characters epitomize those. We would, and as we followed that story or any story in which they're engaging with each other, we would start unlocking.
Yeah. Well, what would happen is we would start having an expansion of consciousness and an expansion of sense of self, which means we would have access to more of our inner resources and more choices and more possibilities.
So I'm hearing, I know we have to end soon, and I feel like we're just at the beginning of this, because I feel like this is so rich. Like, first of all, I feel like, so for anybody who's watching this, go to goldencagemusical.com and you'll find out how you can see this show yourself. And I'm really interested, Kathleen, in really like taking each scene of the show apart, because I think each one gives a moment in our own lives. And I'm also thinking, wow, what a fascinating workshop to take others of those pairs. Or for me, what a fascinating concept to take them, allow them to become, physicalized, and see what story they have to tell as I answer the questions about them. It's just, I mean, wow.
Yeah. So I want to close with sharing Jung's concept that he labeled the transcendent function. That was his concept. But the transcendent function, he says, is an organic, innate process that when we consciously hold the tension of the opposites, a uniting third emerges. And we see that happen in this musical over and over again. There are little moments where the tension of the opposites is being held in these personified parts of the self, Alphea and Boris. And then the resolution happens organically in the meeting, in the coming together of the opposites. And we see that at the moment Alphea is freed from the cage. We see that at the moment that she starts to fly, or the illusion is she's going to fly. And we see it at the moment that she comes back to get Boris. And she says, I've come back to get you, Boris. And there's that beautiful line where she says, so this is how it happens. You lock yourself in. You lock yourself in. And so wherever we're locked into thinking, I can't do this differently, this is who I am, I've always been this way, whatever, that's the prison moment. And that part of us that sees the larger truth. There's so much more, so much more.
Wow. Well, I know we have to end, and I just want to say, Kathleen, I invite you to for us to create an entire workshop about this in order to unlock these, because I really see that this is just one of those places where our work is so aligned, not aligned. One illuminates the other.
Right. That's right.
And so again, so Kathleen, your people can connect with you at the Inner Divine Circle, right?
Right. InnerDivineSpirit.com or Kathleen Wiley, JungianAnalyst.com, either one.
Beautiful. And you can connect with the show that we're talking about at goldencagemusical.com. And you can also connect with me at hipharp.com, which is hip as in cool, harp as in the instrument. Kathleen, thank you for this beautiful moment. And we could just talk about this one subject over and over again. And I look forward to speaking again with you and with all of you again next week. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.